Welcome to this video about the NWEA MAP class report. We're going to walk you through a few things to help you understand the information that's in this report. Well, what things are we going to walk you through? Well, we're going to tell you first how to access the class report. Then we're going to give you a nice overview of all the awesome information on the first page. Then we're going to look at the student list on page 2 through whatever, give you some odds and ends to pay attention to. And then we're going to give you some questions to help you analyze your own class report. By the end of this video, I'm sure you will be jumping for joy. So, how do you find the class report? Well, I've got the steps listed on this slide, but what I want to do is actually go through and walk you through the process. Okay? So you're going to go to your MAP login screen. You're going to log in using your username and password. Then you're going to come over here. It's probably going to look like this. You're going to click on View Reports. You're going to have to click on it to get a drop down to come down. Then you're going to click on MAP Growth Reports. Now, again, I have lots more options here than probably you do, but you want to find the class report. And again, I have more options here. Then you just need to walk through the prompts at this point and find whatever class you would like to take a look at. So if you want to stop this video and pull one up real quick, that would be great, because we're going to walk through some information found on this report right now. So let me give you an overview of the first page. How do you make sense of all the goodness that is the first page of this report? Well, what you're going to do, I've kind of tucked it away here in the bottom, is you'll see a chart like that at the top of the first page, where it says total students with valid growth test scores. Those are the total students that took the test within the window that we set as a district. Then you've got the mean and median. I hope we know the difference between those. The mean is simply the average. The median is the score in the middle. Usually close, not always the same thing. But what I really want to point out here, a very useful number on this page is the standard deviation. Now, the standard deviation is a fantastic gauge for how much differentiated instruction your class needs. Here's the guidelines for this. If you have a standard deviation for your class of 8 or less, you could probably use a lot of whole group instruction with a smattering, if you will, of differentiated instruction. If you have standard deviations between 9 and 14, you're going to have to use a mix of small and whole group instruction. You can't use all whole group instruction. The reason is the standard deviation tells you the amount of variation in your classroom. If you have larger and larger standard deviations, that means you have greater differences in what these kids know and are able to do. So you have to accommodate for those differences to get everyone to mastery. So 9 through 14, you're going to want to use a mix of small and whole group. If you have a standard deviation of 15 or higher, you're going to want to use mostly differentiated instruction. Now, how do you find out what these kids know and don't know? Well, you dig into that student profile report. Now, the student profile report is going to be covered in more detail in a different video. But know that if you have a high standard deviation for your class, you can't just go through this whole group instruction. You can't just teach a regular 6th grade curriculum or a regular 3rd grade curriculum. You have to accommodate for the differences in your class. Okay? So I like this little guide. Please use this as a gauge for how much differentiated instruction should be going on in your classrooms. The bottom part of the page is full of pretty colors. And these colors correspond to different percentiles. Now, MAP divides them up into 5 sections, so therefore they are called quintiles. So you've got high, high average, average, low, and then you see the ranges for the percentiles they've listed underneath. Now you'll also see this column, this mean RIT plus or minus error column. 3 points on either side of the RIT is pretty typical. But that's where, if again you know some stats, you start getting a statistically significant difference. Okay, just an FYI. Just some interesting, or actually some things you should be aware of. They call them goal areas still on the class report. In the student profile report, they call them instructional areas. They are the same thing. And also here, notice, they will give you the standard deviation for each of these instructional areas. The same rules apply that we were talking about on this slide. Apply for each instructional area. So you can actually differentiate within an instructional area. Again, go dig into the student profile report, see what skills and concepts kids need to know in each of these areas to figure out how do you differentiate for these students. So that's the first page. What about the rest of this report, the student list? Well, if you're looking at the math report, you're not going to see any Lexiles. But I want to talk specifically if you're looking at a reading report. You're going to see Lexiles. Just an FYI, Lexiles start to populate at a RIT of 172. If it's less than 172, you're going to see this BR there. BR does not mean bad reader. BR means beginning reader. If you want to figure out the true Lexile score of a student, you take the bottom number in the Lexile range and you add 100 to it. Another thing that you might need to be aware of, and again, this applies to this report, but also other reports, especially the Achievement, Status, and Growth report. These RITs, they give you nice round numbers in the middle. However, these RITs are really decimals. So if you start seeing some discrepancies, remember that those are really decimals. We just or the map system rounds them up for you. Okay, just an FYI. Let's take a look at the test duration column. Typically, NWEA considers a test time of 10 to 15 minutes or less an invalid test. MAP will automatically render a test taken in 6.5 minutes or less invalid for you. But I would take a look at your test duration and consider retesting 15 minutes or less. Okay. Also, a note about the K2 growth tests. If you don't know this, the K2 growth tests are actually read to students. However, once they start answering questions at about or above 172, the sound starts to go away. It doesn't read it to them anymore. If they keep getting them wrong, then the sound will start to come back as they start answering questions lower than 172. So it does see, can they independently read some of these questions? So those were some odds and ends just about the class report to help you in analyzing it. But really, let's talk about a process. Let's talk about some questions to get you started in digging into your own class report. So, here are some analysis questions you may want to consider. First, compare some data points. Compare your mean to the median. Then, is your mean on or above, below the grade level norm? Okay, that's a good piece of data to figure out. If it's below the grade level norm, that means you're really going to have to look at what kids need to master. Also consider instructional implications. How might your comparisons in step 1 affect how you're going to do instruction in your classroom? Think about instructional readiness. How well do your grade level textbooks and materials align with the instructional readiness? Look at your math. Are they ready for the level of math that you're actually going to teach them? Do you need to differentiate? Look at your Lexile levels. Again, make sure your materials are aligned to what their ability is. Again, look at the 90th or 30th percentile. Do you have any students that are really what we call outliers in terms of instructional readiness? And then consider your instructional implications. What would you have to do to help all of these students succeed? Again, consider your standard deviation, which we talked about. Consider your goal or performance or instructional areas. Okay? Look at the mean score. Look at their standard deviations. What implications does this area information have for your instructional planning? It says view your report by goal descriptors, and I put a little example over here. So instead of RIT ranges, you can see the low, low average, high, high average. Those are the goal descriptors. So then you want to sort your report by that. That's one of the options you have when you're actually pulling up your class report. You'll go show goal descriptors. This is a nice, easy way to see what areas, a quick, easy way to see what areas are the weakest or the strongest for your class. So in sum, we've talked about how you get to the class report, first page overview, some odds and ends to pay attention to on the student list, and give you some questions to help analyze that report. If you have any more specific questions, feel free to contact Terry or see your building principal.